Okay, so for this panel session, the title is Ensuring Successful Transformation, Avoiding Issues and Driving Change. The moderator for this panel session is my fellow LogiSYM organizing committee member, Joe Lombardo. And Joe is the director at ESP Consult. Again, a very familiar face on the LogiSYM circuit over the last few years. So Joe, it's all yours to talk about ensuring successful transformation, avoiding issues and driving change. Right, all yours, Joe.
Thank you, Bob. That's a nice introduction. So this one? No, I can use the hand ones. Okay. Okay, while we're doing that, can I just invite my panel members up? So I've got Dr. Chris Holmes, is the Managing Director of IDC Insights Asia Pacific. Welcome, Chris. Also with us, we have Andreas Ramsmeyer. I hope I pronounced that well, Andreas, founder and CEO of AdNaven. We had his presentation earlier on this morning. Also joining us here on stage is Mangesh Admanne. He's the VP Go-to-Market Planning for the Estee Lauder Companies, Inc. And joining us on by Zoom, I believe, is another panel member, Davindra Panharkar. So Davindra should be joining us soon. Oh, there you are. Welcome, Davindra. Sorry you couldn't be with us today, but thanks for joining us. So thank you to all of you for joining me on this panel discussion, gentlemen. Ensuring successful transformation, avoiding issues and driving change. Now, we heard earlier on this morning that the word transformation is not welcome, but we're still going to talk about it, okay? So let me kick off by asking our panel members, first of all, what has your experience been when it comes to dealing with transformation? Give us a brief scenario from which you have started such a process. So Chris, can I start with you? Maybe share very briefly some of the impacts that your experience in transformation and how we build the side towards successful results.
Thanks, Joe. So I have to put my hand up and say I'm one of the people who talks about it and sort of rather than actually does it. So again, my view is probably slightly skewed. Again, having also heard some of the comments from other people this morning. But what we do is actually work with organizations to help them, if you like, put in place some of their strategic roadmaps for transformation. And I think that's one of the key things that we see. And we've heard a couple of times this morning, this need for that vision, the need to actually have those objectives set out, which the whole organization strives for. And once you can paint that picture and then start to work backwards, then you can really get the rest of the organization on board. And again, it's really interesting because some of the areas where we've seen, if you like, the greatest success have almost been the most simple. And they can be things like just getting the right taxonomy in place. So when we start to talk around sales and operations planning, for example, that means one thing to supply chain, it means one thing to manufacturing, it means one thing to sales, but actually trying to get everyone to agree on that suddenly becomes very, very key. And so getting everybody on the same page, I think, has been one of those key success factors that we've actually seen. And also opening up the communication. And perhaps the second point I'd like to bring out as well is when we look at organizations, the other big thing is who actually leads it. Because transformation tends to be about breaking down the silos. And we've got silos and we've got people in charge of the silos. So how do we actually break those down? And it starts to impact people's lives, you know, the way they've been doing the job for the last 20 years. So again, that's been another one of those fundamentals as to who actually owns it. And I mean, I keep coming back to one of the organizations we work with. We asked them, so, you know, we talked to IT and said, do you have a transformation roadmap? They said, yes. Has operations seen it? No. And then we talked to operations and they said, do you have a transformation roadmap? And they said, yes. Can we see it? No. You can, but don't share it with IT. And so, you know, some of the fundamental issues, and again, you know, it seems funny when we talk about it here, but when you're in the thick of it, these are some of the things that really need to be overcome. So again, I mean, I could go on and on about this, Joe. Unfortunately, you picked the wrong panelist for the first question.
No,
but
no, we'll come back to that in a minute because they're interesting points you raised there. But certainly we will come back and explore that further, Chris. Thanks for that. So Andreas, what's your view on that? So your experience when it comes to dealing with transformation and some of the scenarios that you've been exposed to in the process?
I think a lot of good things were just said by my colleague here. And I think that if we look at transformation and the successful transformation, I think it's about people communication, but also have a very clear mission that what do you want to accomplish? Why do you do the transformation? And make sure that you are in charge of that on a high enough management level so you actually can control the different silos.
Right.
So that's my, yeah.
Okay, and we'll come back to that because there's a point there as well that you've made. So Mangesh, what about you?
Yeah, so, okay, I had a slightly different approach on the question because you asking about the experience about the
Yes.
transformation, right?
Right.
So as part of the Estee Lauder companies, I have been under transformation since last 10 years. We have changed systems, we have changed processes. I would say it's a roller coaster ride. It goes highs, it has excitements, it has its own charm. At the same time, it goes down many times and it goes up again. In the world of Estee Lauder, we call it, we have a term for it, we are changing the wheels of the car while driving it. And that's the difficulty and the, I would say, energy of transformation at the same time. But as pointed out by Chris and Andreas here, right, without the vision, unless until we have that to change what we are trying to do today and the way we are going to do tomorrow, it really doesn't happen. So we need to have that to enjoy that ride.
Okay, great. Thanks, Manish. And we'll come back to that as well because a couple of points you raised that we're exploring. Dev, what's your view on that? Can you hear us okay, by the way?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, in my view, it's a great experience. It's a great opportunity, transformation from a learning experience perspective, also from a growth opportunity perspective, right? And Mangesh mentioned about having the right context behind it. It can be a great value addition, both individually, professionally, and for the company as a whole. I've been in it as a recipient, as a functional recipient, but also as a functional leader, driving transformation in the area of planning, logistics, and customer service. So that's in a short answer to your question.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Dev. So I'll stay with you, Dev, while you're on the line. The next point I'll ask is basically, why is business transformation so important for organizations in today's context, and in particular in the logistics industry? Now, I asked that question because this morning we heard that transformation is all about just change management. So can we drill down into this concept of why is change important? Why bother to change?
Yeah, absolutely. As they say, change is the only constant, right? And in the past couple of years, with the onset of the pandemic, it has only accelerated certain trends that we see in terms of better visibility, both required both on the demand side as well as on the supply side, as businesses go through this phase, right? And I think some of these change needs or requirements have been ongoing even before. It's only been accelerated by the pandemic. But if you look at some of the macro trends facing the industry and the world today, you talk about climate change, talk about sustainability, you talk about digitization more as well. And this is deeply impacting how we manufacture and distribute our goods and services to consumers, right? And therefore, it is equally important and impactful, especially in the logistics domain. So therefore, companies, to keep themselves relevant, we have also heard how the life cycle of a company, has just shrunk from maybe 7,500 years to now maybe 15, 20, 25 years at best. So to keep relevant and to keep competing, it is an imperative for companies to realize the changes around them and the context in which we all operate, and then respond to that change. Hence, it is an imperative today.
Thanks, Dev. I appreciate it. Mangesh, can I come back to you? Because in the context of your business, in Estee Lauder, being a high brand consumer type business, Why is transformation important to that business?
That's a really nice question, right? Means, why do we need to transform,
Exactly.
right? If you really go to the fundamentals, every organization is working to deliver a value. Now that value today we might be delivering in a such certain way, but if we want to continue to deliver the value in the future and in much better way, we have to transform. And transformation, guys, as in the morning we heard, right? It's a change, but it's not an incremental change.
Right.
It's a fundamentally different way of doing things. It's fundamentally different way of working, ways of processes and everything. So if you're trying to do a fundamental differently, you have to transform yourselves. And that's the criticality of why we need to transform. We have to continue to deliver the value, to continue to sustain, deliver value for over years and years and years. And if we have to do that as a visionary company, we need to transform ourselves. Okay. That becomes the fundamental answer. And now coming to the logistics, why logistics has to change, right? Just giving the example of my company, we believe the consumer is the key for survival. And for us, consumer experience, how she wants to touch the products. Most of my consumers are all female team members here. How does she want to touch the product? How does she want to open the product? And today, much more than any time earlier in our history, the logistics team is directly touching the consumer. Most of the times, what we talk about is shipping, transportation, and everything. It's not touching the consumer. But with the retail e-com change, now logistics is touching the consumer. And that's where logistics becomes an important portion of this transformation journey. With so many different companies, we heard in the morning about Alibaba or Amazon. They have changed. They are more of a transportation company, logistics companies, but they are doing a lot of different business. Right. But if you think that in a much different way, it's a consumer engagement that has changed. And that's where I would say you need to change. There's no options other than that.
So the consumer engagement, consumer engagement is actually forcing the change,
Yes.
driving the change forward.
Yeah.
Chris, anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree. I mean, when I look across all the different industries, we see those that are consumer facing are the ones leading the change. So typically it's been banking, it's been retail. And again, you're starting to, then it sort of goes back into the manufacturing, government, and then we get into utilities, mining, and all the others. But it's anything to do with that customer engagement is really driving that change. And also, I think that whole experience that once the consumer has experienced, a 30-minute delivery window, they want it for everything. That's just the expectation. And so there's rapid innovation going on in that space.
Andreas, it's not just consumer businesses are changing, right? Other businesses are changing. Well, what do you think is driving their change? Is their customer? Or how do you see that?
To a large extent, I think it starts with the consumer and the consumer behavior. And we all people, buying things. And I think can only agree with my, also, the change is now really speeding up because we have got used to so many things in private life that we also are expecting in our professional life.
Right. So basically we are talking about customer centricity. Customer centricity is now at the core of what transformation is all about. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that talking about transformation, I also think that it has a higher degree of thinking than just continuous improvements.
Right.
It's about doing something not just a little bit better, but actually drastically different.
Sure. Now, digital transformation as a word has been bandied about quite a lot. Everyone's talking about transformation, implying digital transformation or vice versa, and the terms are becoming more interchangeable. Chris, can you help us define in what you are seeing in terms of does digital transformation mean to a business and the impact that digital transforms logistics and the supply chain?
Yeah, so again, it's quite interesting because sort of when we first started to hear about digital transformation, we go and talk to organizations about it and sort of ask them the question, what does it mean for you? And the answer was, well, we're transforming digitally, but there was no sort of substance underneath that. And again, we'll come back to the comment I made about taxonomy. So we talk around this idea of transforming decision-making with technology. That's what we mean when we talk about digital transformation. And I think that helps to put it into context, because, and again, if we go back and look at what a lot of organizations are doing and where they're actually trying to implement technology, you've got to focus on what the end game is, not just implementing technology because it's cool. I mean, we've all seen examples of that, and someone gets very excited about the latest augmented reality solution in the warehouse, and then you sort of go, well, what's it actually achieved, or what's it going to do? And it not very much. So again, it's focused on that business decision and really about providing the data and the information to aid that decision making. Now, when we actually start to think about, okay, what does that actually mean from a success perspective, and where are we seeing some of the big opportunities? And again, we've touched this morning around collaboration platforms. We talked around visibility becoming so key. And I think everyone used to talk about visibility prior to the pandemic, and then it suddenly got elevated right, to try and find out what was happening in ports in China and where things were. We're starting to see greater focus around things like connected assets, again, accelerated by the pandemic. Suddenly you've got remote maintenance. So again, somebody can actually go and sort of provide guidance on a piece of equipment without flying halfway around the world. Right. A lot of excitement around that. Starting to see more artificial intelligence, machine learning, again, predictive maintenance, people starting to apply those type of technologies and start to learn from that. I mean, there's a great example in Singapore at the HP manufacturing. I think it's one of the lighthouse factories for World Economic Forum, and you go around there and you actually see they've got vision inspection, which is starting to learn, and they've also got data coming back from where the products are actually being used in field and they fail, and then coming back and they can trace it back through the production line. I mean, there's so many things going on. I mean, across Southeast Asia, we're seeing massive interest in robotics, particularly in warehousing. And again, I think this has been exacerbated by the shortage of workers, which right. I think every country I speak to has got a shortage of workers, so I don't know where everybody's gone. But, I mean, I was reading the other day, Vietnam has a shortage of workers. So, I think some of the other ones are just around the data collection. I mean, the whole thing around IT/OT convergence, sort of starting to get data from actually what's going on in the shop floor, what's going on with the trucks, what's going on with the ships, what's going on with our inventory, but then being able to connect that through to our enterprise systems. So there's so many things going on. And I think one of the issues is, and one of the complexities is actually starting to put all of these into some form of roadmap, putting them into some form of context and getting some prioritization, because there's almost so many opportunities to have these transformation projects, but we've got to make some prioritization. And again, we've almost seen the shift now that people have got the roadmaps in place, but it's now actually the rubber's hitting the road and we've actually got to implement it. And so I think that implementation, that mindset and getting the right skills in place is what's holding organizations back today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think you make two very good points. One is basically about the visibility and one is about the transparency. And they're not the same thing, are they? They're two very different things in terms of the thought behind digital transformation. Dev, what's your view on this? I mean, again, digital transformation, what it means for business, the impact on the supply chain. What is your take on it?
Absolutely. I think today the imperative is that along with visibility, the idea is to what do you do with visibility, right? Once you have the visibility, you also need to then figure out how you add value, maybe by being more agile. So you need to, bring about strategies that you can have in order to be more flexible, in order to, be more reliable at the same time. And therefore improve your service to customers. So I think as long as the end goal is clear in terms of what is digitization or what is digital enabling, digitization is typically an enabler into that whole transformation journey in terms of the outcomes that you're expecting for customers and indeed your own internal process in doing them more efficiently, automated, and so on. I think that's important to keep in view. And not just digitize for the sake of digitization, because then, if you're not taking the opportunity to set right your process and to really apply some critical thinking on it, you're basically then going to automate chaos, which is what you don't want.
Sure. So before we talk about successful transformation, I'd like to ask Andreas, what are the prerequisite criteria required to plan a rollout and transformation program?
I think the most successful criteria is coming back to the organization, setting with clear objectives of what you are to accomplish. And when I talk about digital transformation, I tend to see three things. I mean, first of all, you have the digital interface, and that can be either that you are using a web page, an app, or actually using APIs or EDIs as well. And the second level is, of course, to try to automate those kind of things. Okay, break down the process, take one step at a time, and make a change. But the last thing is, of course, in order to really make the digital transformation, I also do believe that you need to dare thinking about different business models, different organization structures, breaking the silos, because that's ultimately what the digital transformation is about, doing things differently.
So you've got to change the mindset of the organization before you can transform. Mangesh, what do you think? I mean, obviously you've been through this as well. What is that, the prerequisites of change management?
Yeah, I think the way we started and our latest journey is still ongoing. There are few things which we focused on, as Andreas mentioned, right? What is the goal? We need to really know what's our vision. So Chris pointed out most of the warehousing and the manufacturing interfaces, we are going to the consumer,
Right,
because we are consumer facing company. So how are we going to really plan? How are we really going to forecast for it? So that vision and communication of that vision, not only at the top, but across down to the end user, because ultimately it's the market planner who is going to plan for it, taking the consumer insight in. So that whole communication actually we have been working on that for last 2 years. That guys, we need to move there. We need to move there. And now with this pandemic, actually we are already in the process of transformation, and that helped us to be there further, right? So that becomes the one of the foremost important, the clarity of vision, why we want to do it, and then communication across, top down, across everywhere. Because when you're changing one section of the organizations, is actually impacting all the surrounding interfaces of that organization, of that function. And that becomes very difficult to manage. The lower you go into the hierarchy,
right,
they cannot communicate that we are changing this way. So the leadership has to go and tell the commercial partners, the finance partners, everybody, that we are changing it. We are doing it differently. So you need to help us, you need to support, and you need to support the team down. So that becomes very important.
So the communication of the multi-tracks that you are driving.
Yes.
And
Why we are doing the changes, and what is going to change as the change is going to go down and down and down. So that becomes very important. It doesn't matter whether we are doing a digital transformation in the plant, or we're doing the transformation in the planning, or in a warehouse. It has to be communicated to everyone.
Sure.
The second most important one was, right, and I think it is, I would say, risk appetite. Because however confident we are about how the digital transformation is going to come out and work out, right, there will be always some risk associated with it. And I would say that, how do you take that risk?
Okay.
Is it going to impact the entire function? Is it going to impact the entire business unit? So that risk appetite needs to be decided, that, okay, we are going to plan out this, means in Estée Lauder, we have a concept of do and learn. So we take a small section, we will do it, learn it, and then scale it out everywhere, right? Some people might go for a big bang approach,
Right.
but then it's the risk appetite what we have to decide on. So I think those are the few
Very critical. Yeah.
critical things. And of course, as you mentioned, Andreas, right, the skill set.
Yeah.
Is the team ready?
Right.
Even if we are giving them all these tools and technology, is the team ready to take those tool sets?
And how do you know that, sorry, Mangesh, how do you know that when the team is ready? How do you know when to go to the next step? You never do know, do you?
No, we never know that. And that's where the training and communication comes back again.
Right, right.
So
Okay.
training has to be there. And I think we have been hearing since morning, right? The new generation is very different. And I think the new generation is really ready.
Right.
As long as you tell them why we are doing that, how we want to do it,
Right.
they are ready and they can drive that change themselves. So that's
Okay.
there.
Help us understand, what sort of training are you talking about? Is it training, technical training? Is it competence training? What exactly are
Both,
you
both.
referring to?
It's both technical competencies as
Right.
well as the soft skills.
Okay. Okay.
Without the soft skills, guys, no transformation is
Right.
going to be successful.
Thanks, Mangesh. Very interesting view. Dev, you're also in the consumer business. I mean, you're in the food supply, and I mean, your company is a big giant in the supply chain for. What is your take on this? What are the criteria, the prerequisites that you have experienced in the change management process that you've been going through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we need to understand here is that we need to create a kind of a powerful coalition. Once we have the vision of why we need to do that, then to have this co-creation of the vision in terms of the to be state, and then a coalition of like-minded stakeholders, individuals within the company that will
Right.
drive and guide people through that. Because I think it would be, we should never underestimate the importance of mindset and behavior in this whole transformation journey. Yes, you can have, very logical reasons of why you want to do it. You will have the, well-defined process, the best tools available, even the best people, but without the right mindset and behavior and attitude towards change, it will not give you the requisite impact. And that's sort of the learning from this journey. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we'll come back to some of those points in a while. I'd like to open the questions from the audience. We have one more section to go in the question and answer, but and any questions from the audience to our panelists on what we've heard so far? Have you experienced this problem? Have you given up? Do you agree, disagree, violently agree, violently disagree? Please let us have your views. Anybody? No? Yes, please. Come to the mic.
Hi, this is Sunil. Okay, great topic. In fact, very close to my heart and work I do. In driving change during implementation of transformation, I think I'm just sharing, it's not a question, that right from the planning of the transformation and change, you need to, as per my experience, what I see very few organizations are doing is, apart from top down, you need to start the bottoms up work together, right? And that's where the miss happens. A lot of times implementation happens top down, communication also happens top down, but we don't connect with the people on the ground who have to adapt the change, that what is in it for them in this change, right? Unless you answer that question, whatever top-down communication you do may not fully work, right? Ultimately, it has to come from the heart when they adapt the change, right? And the biggest question to answer is, what is in it for me? People who have to really accept the change, right? So that's my experience, just a bit of 2 cents from my side.
But thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. But doesn't that imply that the communication down is not complete? Because as Mangesh is saying, communication, training, and if people don't get the message,
Yeah.
surely there's something wrong. But if you're communicating continuously and you're training and developing, that message comes across. Mangesh, you want to add to that?
I just want to add, and I agree with what Sunil is saying, right? Is that when we say transformation, right? I would say there are two triangles. The strategy is at the top, and then it goes down.
Right,
But the impact of change
right.
is an upside down,
Absolutely.
because the most impacted team or the people who are there actually are the ground people who are actually working day in, day out. So what Sunil is saying is, right, yes, you communicate that, but you have to explain to that those who are people are working day in, day out, why and what is in them for them, and
Absolutely.
how it is they're going to help the organization to change the vision and continue the to the value growth. I think that becomes the critical portion of the communication.
Can I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen is that the changes, I mean, let's just take a sort of manufacturing or warehousing example. The change has not been so much at that bottom level. It's almost that supervisory level, that sort of decision-making level where, again, you know, we can have the conversation about middle management. You know, what does middle management do? Makes decisions with incomplete information based on experience. And now we're talking about, again, if we have the end vision, it's this notion of now I've got a complete data set. When I make a decision, I know with some degree of certainty what the result is going to be. I know how it's going to impact my clients. I know it's going to impact my suppliers. I know how it's going to impact. And so I think it's that level that we've seen is going to be the most impacted. And the guys on the shop floor quite often are very, very keen to actually have these change because they've been moaning about it forever, you know, and they've been working in it and, you know, oh God, here we go, another Excel spreadsheet that's been printed out and, you know, I can't read it because I sweated on it or, you know, all those kind of examples. But now suddenly this shift towards sort of getting that data, you know, the screens around everywhere, giving people the information, what they need to do. So I think that's almost that supervisory level. In some cases, we're actually seeing that disappear. You know, this shift now to sort of self-directed work teams powered by technology, the work orders are coming down automatically. There isn't that supervisory role requirement anymore. That's gone. And so I think it's almost that level is the one I'm seeing impacted.
Any comments, Andreas, on your side? I know you talked about courage before. Is this a question of
Yeah,
courage
I think
as well?
it all very much comes back to courage. And the courage to do things differently and the courage to dare to try things. But of course, we should also don't underestimate that all people at the shop floor, but also middle management, they also fear these changes because they are very comfortable with their positions where they are right now.
Sure.
And they are very comfortable with the way they have been doing business for many years.
Dev, I'll come back to you in a little while, so I'm not excluding you. Any other questions from the audience? That was a very good comment there, Sunil, I believe. Thanks very much for that. Anybody else? Because clearly we are talking about success factors in transformation, but if we don't deal with the prerequisites, what it is that we need to do up front, then we are spelling failure, right? So what are some of your experiences in your organizations? Are you going through a transformation now that maybe the communication, the leadership, the criteria to lay down the... Sanjay, you got a...
Can I ask a question?
You certainly can.
Thank you so much. And Jay and Joe, thanks for leading such a fantastic wisdom on stage as well as on the web. So maybe a question for Dr. Chris with a lot of data behind. We know that, and keep the transformation word aside for a moment, but even normal IT implementation initiatives, there is a very high failure rate of 60 to 75% generally. That's what I have seen before. Now, do we have the statistics of these failure rates? What are the reasons for the failure? Was it a top-down communication failure, or was it a ground-up skill set kind of a learning failure? Where the failure occurs within the broad range of the organization? Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay, for that question. And if I had the answer, I think I'd be on a beach somewhere, having retired many years ago. So, and it's a very interesting question because we have a lot of conversation about risk. Digital is all about risk. And when we start to look at, when we start to get into where some of the failures occur, it can be everything from the roadmap, it can be everything from the organization, it can be everything from the metrics. I mean, we may be measuring the wrong thing. It can even be from the technology, and some of the examples are just focus on the technology piece. I mean, one of the big issues we see is that we talk about typically starting small. We get a proof of concept in place, and then we look to scale it. And I've seen examples where there's been this fantastic proof of concept. Say, we come back to, say, an augmented reality implementation in a warehouse. It's great. It's fantastic. And then they go, can we scale? And they go, no. You know, we don't have 5G, you know, in the Philippines. We don't have 5G in the warehouse outside of Chennai, wherever it might be. And so as a result, it's categorized as a failure because people haven't taken into account the fact that if it did succeed, we could scale. So trying to break out of this proof of concept prison requires that when you actually create that roadmap, you actually you're cognizant of what that technology infrastructure is underneath and how you can scale very quickly to get those results, not going back to the board and saying, we need another 4 years and it's going to cost another $50 million because we actually need to upgrade all the networking around all of our global factories in order to move forward with this. So I think that that's certainly one of the key things. But there's a myriad of reasons why projects actually fail. I speak to so many organizations that are still on, we're on year 5 of their 2-year ERP implementation, and the end is still not in sight. I mean, we're still trying to get some basics right out there. So yeah, it's definitely one we can discuss over several beers, not even a single beer, several beers.
Good. Thanks for that. Deb, you got any comments on that question or that point?
No, I think I resonate with what Dr. Chris was saying just now.
Okay,
It's also
great.
linked to, how the requirements are translated. Oftentimes, it's a question between, the project team, discussing and deciding whether they have adequate resources to do this and the way they want to do this, versus the recipients, which are the functional users and the business owners, how they perceive it, what they want to get out of it, and whether they have the adequate resources and mindset to support it as well. And oftentimes this gap also is a cause for many such failures, because maybe there's requirements fit gap analysis was not done properly, or the requirements in terms of resources was not done properly. Oftentimes it is assumed that digital transformation, yeah, you got to do basically more things with less people and so on. Not necessarily, and not from the start. You probably need more effort before it stabilizes, and this is probably the common mistake that also causes a pitfall in my view.
So while you're on the line, let me just ask this question, because I was going to ask Chris this question, but I'll ask you first. So clearly we all know that the complexities of a change management program, a transformation program, are not trivial. They're complex. So how do you go about starting to lay the ground such that the outcomes will be achieved? Not even success, but the outcomes, because things are changing, evolving. What are the priorities for everybody in the room here? What are the first priorities we should start thinking? Small operating circle that we should be focusing on.
Absolutely. I think typically, companies organize around projects, right? And then they have a broader outreach to all the key stakeholders, and there is communication around what the scope will be, what are the nature of changes involved, and so on. What happens is, as time progresses, there are times and cases where the urgent issues drive out what is important, which is staying on track, because any project will have the triple constraints of time, scope, and cost to deliver in terms of outcomes. So I think to avoid that, we organizations also need to look into how to ring fence to a certain level. How to establish clear trade-offs between doing something now as opposed to doing it later. Often during the pandemic, there were times where the leadership team said, "Oh yeah, let's go slow on this bit on the projects. Let's focus on getting the crisis at hand resolved." But I think it is a double-edged sword, because what you're trying to do is also make yourself more capable to solve and to tackle such issues and crises in the future. So I think it's a couple of things, articulating the trade-offs very clearly, and prioritizing those actions which also require time, money, and commitment from external partners, because oftentimes it's not just internal teams that are working on transformation. You are also relying on external partners who have committed their own time and resources behind it. So, ensuring that stays on track and does not derail, and then monitoring the change requests from the operational team very closely, so that you are keeping track of the directionality, that what you want to implement or have as an outcome of a transformation versus what you are getting as requests while operating the business. They are not diametrically opposite.
Okay, clear. It's courage as well. As Andrea says, it needs courage. You need to actually drive with courage. Chris, you want to add anything to that? Because clearly, we all know the complexity of transformation, but we talked about prerequisites, we talked about communication, we talked about training. What about leadership? I mean, leadership is something I believe is lacking in transformation. Real leadership, not you do and I watch. It's actually that engagement, but also that competent engagement. Are you seeing there's a gap in this area?
That's a really good point, Joe. And in fact, literally just got some data back, which explores that. And I think, one of the things we have seen is that, and I mentioned it earlier, by and large, people have got the roadmaps in place. There is this vision where people want to go, that's sort of there. But now we're seeing it's that digital mindset, that ability to actually take that roadmap and then actually move forward with the implementation. And by that, I mean, it's actually starting to have that capability to know what the technology can do, but also what the technology can't do.
Right.
And to actually be realistic about that. And also thinking about how the organization has changed. I mean, the gentleman from Echo Shoes said earlier on, if you're not an analyst in our supply chain organization, you don't have a job. And I think a lot of the roles are going to fundamentally change from that sort of rolling up the sleeves, running out on the shop floor and getting it done, to actually sitting there and actually trying to actually weave the different data sources together to actually come up with this picture, which then we can then use to actually drive some decisions.
Right.
That's going to be the skill of the future.
Okay.
And it's the skill organizations need today, but trying to find those people in the market now is very, very challenging or very, very expensive.
Okay, so let's move on because time is pressing. So let me ask Andreas on this point. We talk about the internal organization, the prerequisites, etc. But the market out there is changing, the industry is changing, customers are changing, the chips keep moving around. How do you keep control of the internal, the external, the middleman, all the players in the jigsaw to stay on track, to make sure that your program is on track?
I think that we are coming back to the questions we had here earlier as well. I mean, I think actually that we might be planning a bit too much. We are planning we should do digital disruption. We are planning we should do a lot of projects. We are involving the greatest ERP systems in the world, making 5-10 years plans, but the world is continuing to go.
Exactly.
And I think it's, so I mean, my strong recommendation here is, I mean, start small. Start with the things you can influence now that goes in the right direction.
Right.
Don't go for big projects. Go for things that you can try in a month, 2 weeks, and just do it. And then I also think if we do that, we also get less failures because we are changing people during these longer cycles as well.
Exactly.
So keep the speed up and just try, fail fast, keep going.
Fail fast.
Fail fast.
And how do you recover from failing fast?
No,
You have to have the right people.
but if you don't, it comes back to courage again.
Right.
And I think, I mean, if you know where to go,
Right.
which is the vision, you have the courage to try things, try the small things, then try them in a small scale. If it works, scale it up. If it doesn't work, go for another thing instead of just planning, sitting in meetings.
Absolutely.
And also, I come back to that. I do see that sometimes the wanted result is not the same from the consultancy company supporting you and from your own business. Because the consultancy, they want to have work next year as well.
Yeah.
You would like to make a more effective supply chain.
So avoid planning by paralysis, or paralysis by planning, basically. Mangesh, what's your view on that?
I was just going to say, fail fast, fail small, basically, right? So take the risk quickly, take the decisions, and move on. Because as you said, right, we really cannot plan for 5 years.
Right.
There's nothing going to be consistent. Nobody visualize how it is going to be today, and we even don't know how FY22 is going to come out. It's just around here. So take the decisions. I would say take the right path. And start taking the steps towards it. That's the best approach.
And I don't disagree with what you're saying about failing fast and keep on learning from that. But how many organizations can take failure? How many organizations fire and get rid of people because there's one failure? Versus the mindset that says, okay, I fail, I learn, I fail, I learn, and I build and I build. Isn't that one of the obstacles today, that people don't learn from failure and basically change course, right? You agree, Chris? You have some examples.
Totally. I mean, how many times can you fail before you get fired? I learned a lot from that. My performance review, it was great. I learned a lot from that. How many times can you say that?
So how critical is failure to transformation, therefore? Let's ask this question. It's fundamental, because if we want true transformation, we need to fail. How many times? I don't know, but we have to fail.
I think I think you need to step back and actually look at what the projects you're actually doing and where those projects are actually going to impact. That's going to be the key thing. Because if you're changing things internally, they're small, you know, and we're actually looking to say drive another level of optimization in the warehouse and it doesn't quite work out, no one suffered really. We're still back to where we're operating. However, if it's the failure, you know, I mean, we were laughing earlier on about, you know, when supply chains succeed, it doesn't make the front page of the news, you know, whereas when Kentucky Fried Chicken runs out of chicken, it's front page news, you know, and that's monumental. You know, that was something that didn't succeed. So that becomes a monumental issue and a monumental challenge. And so I think you've got to take that fail fast and actually think about where's the impact actually going to be seen, and you know, is it visible or is it within your own internal organization?
Dave, what do you think about failing fast and coping with that? Because many organizations, I think, don't know how to fail fast or don't know how to manage failure.
No, you're right, Joe. I think you know, test, learn, experiment approach is ever so important in this context, and you know, therefore you know, scoping it out clearly and limiting, you know, impact or damage in case you're not able to deliver on the goals, is articulating that very clearly is quite important. And therefore you need to have this kind of agile mindset, agile, you know, implementation mindset to your projects. So you're not just, you know, going for yes, the program is consisting of many projects, but within projects also you got to test out a few things to see how it works. But I agree with you, it's not a given, and organizations still have a long way to go in terms of, you know, adopting that mindset to allow failures and to allow the learning, more importantly, from those failures.
Great. Look, it's been a great discussion. Time is running out. We have touched on a lot of points, a lot of things for you to think about. Are there any other questions from the audience? We've got about 4 minutes left. I want to finish on time. Any other important questions about failure, maybe some of the experiences that you've had in your organization, maybe that you haven't been given the space to experiment, as Dev was saying, scoping out, trying, failing, learning, growing, and going from there. Is there any experience, please?
So we all spoke about transformation, right? Mangesh, you come from a very big organization where I'm pretty sure there's a very top-down sort of driven approach. You're talking about fail fast. It's a lot easier for smaller companies to do it, you know. So when you think about transformation in bigger organizations with the top-down approach and even with the bottoms-up engagement, how much of autonomy or decentralization are companies willing to take with regions with very specific requirements that don't necessarily fit the global template, but are very important for the market, for the customer in that particular region?
Right. Dev, would you like to answer that? Because I see you nodding your head. You've obviously had some experience on this.
Well, one maybe just one approach, if I may, that has worked in my experience, is to establish some sort of a small innovation center, if you like it, some way in which you have you know, some resources available in order to test out and try out a few things, right? And this is in alignment with the global programs, because oftentimes you also run into internal challenges saying, hey, wait a minute, why are you doing this? We are having this in our roadmap in terms of a global rollout, and therefore, as you know, establishing what you can experiment with in the regional context versus a global context. To give you a concrete example, we are a company dealing with agri-commodity, which is the cocoa bean, right? And while we have a standard ERP software, we have advanced planning systems, more or less that is corporate driven globally. But in terms of, you know, optimization of using the right beans for the right products and predicting the quality of those beans, we didn't have any global program. So the alignment was to allow us to test and experiment in this area using, you know, machine learning and advanced optimization capabilities, and then see how it goes, right? And that could work. So we get a pot of money, you get certain key objectives in place, and then you can do an experimentation within an area which doesn't infringe or you know, step on any other toes, let's say.
Your key point was you build an innovation team, an expertise centered actually on which to build on. Mangesh, can I have your view on this? Because I think
I was just agreeing with what they were just saying, right?
Okay.
Is and again, to me, that was also coming as the soft skills portion, right? As a
Sure.
region, as a market, right? How are you able to influence the global transformation or global project team?
Right.
That guys, we agree to everything, whatever you're saying, but this particular portion, we are slightly different. We need a little bit of freedom into this. I'm drawing my boundaries around this, and we will work within these boundaries.
Yeah.
If we have to interact, if we have to go out, and that leadership skill set is required in this transformation.
But influencing also means you have the right tools, you have the right mindset, you have the right
Yes,
information, you have the
yes.
right mandate
Yeah.
to drive the program forward.
I would agree, Joe. Means one of the things, guys, as we are talking here today, right? But these discussions are going all over the world, right? And there is a shift in thought processes.
Sure.
I won't say it
Has
is
to.
completely there,
Yeah.
but there is a shift
It's moving.
happening
Mindset's
everywhere.
moving, for sure.
Mindsets are moving.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? Because we really have run out of time, and I think Bob will concede me a couple of minutes. Any other questions or thoughts to share with us? It's been, I hope it's been an interesting discussion, and I hope we've actually enlightened some of you on what are the pitfalls, what are the barriers, but most importantly, not crowing about the successes, but actually identifying the critical aspects of the planning, the prerequisites, and what it takes to be successful. Any other questions? Okay, so I think I'm going to have to wrap up. I will ask each of my panel members to give us a takeaway statement, a summary of what their thoughts are, because I think that's very important. So if I can start with you, Dev, as you are furthest away from us, what would be your takeaway thoughts? So, one sentence to describe the whole topic.
Yeah, indeed. Well, this is a tough one, but for me, it's about establishing the why very clearly, the context of the business in which you want to transform, mindset and behavior alignment. And then you follow a standard process where you are basically mapping, measuring, and benchmarking your goals so that you keep your transformation journey relevant to the business.
Okay. Thank you, Dev. Chris?
I'd just probably like to just add on to what I've said already, but it's around the skill set. I think the key challenge we see organizations facing over the next 12, 18 months is around skill sets. It's going to be bringing in those people who can actually understand the technology, but also understand the business and bringing those together. And we do actually expect organizations to start to change as they actually use some of these new technologies and actually implement them in the processes that they're currently operating. So I think this is something I would look out for over the next 12, 18 months.
Investing in people's skills, and that's something that is not really forthcoming always, is it?
Well, you've either got to buy it in or you've got to buy it in one way or another, but you can either rent it or you can actually nurture it. And I think these
nurturing takes longer, though, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but these are some of the things I think are going to be those hard decisions. I mean,
a combination of both is probably the best. Yeah. Andreas?
I would like to end like this. Be curious and make sure you have the courage to get started.
Absolutely right. Mangesh, last
Yeah,
word?
I was just thinking two things, right? One is be bold in the vision, in the decision which we are taking. And once you have decided, execute it, right? That's the two main portion, right? And then all the steps are in between to help us to go to the execution. The last but not the least is, right, at the end, we need to show the reinvestment. We need to show the benefits that are coming up, and not necessarily always the cost is the benefit. Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
exactly right.
right. So that needs to get circled back.
And I think we all hope that the C-suite people were in this room to hear all these comments, because they're the guys that should be taking decisions and listening to what we're saying. Chris, Andreas, Mangesh, Devendra, thank you very much for your comments, your sharing of views, your experiences, and I hope, thank you to all of you in the audience who have asked questions and shared your thoughts. I hope it's been interesting for you all, and good luck with your transformation. Thank you all very much. Thank you, guys.